I'll stop sharing until you tell me.
Yes, sir. Okay, boom. And we are live. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to a very special edition of Off the Record on the People's Podcast this evening. We have a magnificent guest with us tonight, one who is going to give us some amazing information as well as inspiration. He is um, an historian, someone who is going, we are going to be well fed tonight. I want everybody to sit back and put your seatbelts on because if you love history, like the People's Podcast affiliates do, you all are going to be, this is great primary source, secondary source. This is some amazing information that he's bringing to us, none other than the world renowned page known as JFK 60 years later. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Joshua. It's nice to be here. Thank you for asking me. I This is an honor and privilege to be on the People's Podcast, and I've done a couple of other podcasts, and I'm getting better all the time. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, on behalf of myself, my family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast, we've been keeping up with the news, and we've seen that there are some JFK declassification files. We're going to go into that. But I got introduced to your page before. This had to be like months ago, and I just started liking every time it came around. I started liking and liking my mother, historian, so she taught us to love history. And how did you get started? JFK with a John President John F. Kennedy, like a page dedicated to this.
I first thing you should know is I'm 57,
Okay.
and I got started at age 13, and it was actually my dad who started me out. Now, this was what, 60 year. I'm 57, so it's 40 years ago,
Mm.
okay, or something like that. And my dad showed me an article, and we have all seen and read this, but it was all of the anomalies, all the weird coincidences between the assassination of President Lincoln and the assassination of President Kennedy. There are a lot. We've all seen that meme. That meme is not new. It was around in the late 70s when my dad first showed it to me. But I thought to myself, man, that is fascinating. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so that's really how I got started. I started reading everything I could get my hands on. Then this is before the internet, of course. Um, but I won't go through all those coincidences, but really, honestly, that was the linchpin moment for me. It was my dad. And then, of course, um, fast forward 20 some odd years to 1991 and the famous movie simply titled JFK by well-known director Oliver Stone,
Yes, sir.
1991. That's the year that came out. Okay, so suddenly the public now the public interest in the JFK assassination case has gone up and down like a wave over the decades, and people are still 62 years later very interested in the topic, and there's a resurgence of interest every few years. Something pops up, some new piece of information comes up, and so here we are today. There is today a resurgence in the case, and I'll go through the timeline of where we are on these JFK records. But I was with the family at Thanksgiving 2 years ago now. So this would have been Thanksgiving of 2022.
Mm.
And I said to myself, hey, this TikTok app is kind of cool. There's a lot of people doing it. This seems fun, but what could I do? They say pick a topic and stick with it. Okay, well, what is a topic that I'm super interested in that nobody else is doing? I know the JFK assassination. And so it's a very specific niche, and I have stayed in it. I am very interested in all United States history, and there are a lot of great history creators on TikTok. Now, you can find whatever you want to find on TikTok, right? Let me just tell you, history's pretty small. I don't I have cats, but I don't do cat videos. I don't dance. I don't lip sync. I'm not capable of doing those things or singing or any of that stuff. I try to stay out of politics completely. There are plenty of TikTok channels for that kind of stuff. But nobody's doing what I'm doing. I mean, no, that's not even true. There are other channels that are doing the same thing. This idea about the JFK assassination is not new.
Mm, mm,
Um, but what I wanted to do was I said, okay, 2023, what I really want to do is go to Dallas and go to Elm Street and Dealey Plaza, and I want to visit the museum, and I want to stand in all the places and see all of the sites and go to that museum on the sixth floor where the sniper's nest was, the Texas School Book Depository. And I want to do all that. That's my New Year's resolution for 2023. And that's where I started the TikTok account in Thanksgiving of 22. And that's what it was going to be all about in 2023. Now, a lot of stuff happened in 2023, including we had a personal tragedy in our family, and that was a tough time. I didn't make it to Dallas in 2023. But in the middle of 2023, suddenly, I don't know what happened, and I can't point to a single video that might have started this, but suddenly the account blew up. For me, for me, just this average dude, um, I suddenly had 40 or 50,000 followers. And I said, wait a second, there's 40 or 50,000 people that are interested in this topic. And me, I have a face made for radio, uh, and I don't sing or dance. So why are they here? Okay, well, they're interested in the case. They're interested in the truth. They're interested in solving the unsolved mystery. And they honestly want to know. Well, it just grew from there. So without really knowing anything about doing TikTok, I just got better at editing and creating content and trying to find that sweet spot of what people were really interested in. And at the same time, news about JFK kept breaking. Now, 2023 was the 60th anniversary of November 22nd, 1963. Okay, that's the famous date that we're dealing with. So this was the perfect time. Okay, I've started a TikTok. I'm going to go to Dallas. I'm going to go in November. I'm going to go on the 60th anniversary, and that's how I named the TikTok account JFK 60 years later. I didn't make it to Dallas, and so I went all through 2024, and I really didn't want to change the name. So even though 2024 was 61 years later, the name stayed the same. Now we're in 2025, and I'm probably not changing the name. It's now 62 years. 2024 was, uh, that was the 61st anniversary, and now okay. So anyway, whatever. I'm committed at this point. Okay, then in December, just a couple months ago, it just happened to turn out that I needed to go to Dallas on work. I have a full time job. I do this for fun. I do it sitting on my couch. I'm sitting on my porch. I don't have a lot of fancy equipment. I've collected a few things and I try different things. But basically, this is me sitting at home doing all this. Uh, but in 2025, 20 December 2024, my work needed something done in Dallas, and I right away volunteered. And I said, "Ooh, I'll go if you let me have a day off there in the middle of it." And they did. And so I did the work project, and then I spent finally after 2 years spent the entire day at in Dallas on Elm Street in the museum, and then in addition, I went around and saw a lot of those other places where I sort of retracing Lee Harvey Oswald's steps when he slips out, you know, quiet like out of the Texas School Book Deposit. Anyway, that's how we got here. So now this month we have a new president, and one of the first things that he does is sign. In a bunch. He signed a bunch of executive orders, right? And it's not up to me to talk about all of those, although everybody can see that everywhere. I focused in on one, and it was the executive order to making public the last of the classified files for JFK. But with that, also the files for the assassination of RFK and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the trifecta. And Malcolm X, honestly, is should have been number four, although that is not maybe not as much of a mystery about that one. But those, of course, those four murders were in the 60s, came as it was just like an unprecedented group of four important leaders cut down. Uh, and of the three of those, at least, I am not well versed on Malcolm X, but of the three of those, um, for sure, there is a mystery that surrounds the assassination of all three. And RFK and MLK, I may just have to start different channels for them. Uh, but every now and then I'll jump over to the side. Anyway, so president signs an executive order to release the remaining files. And here's where we get into the meat of this. We're talking about something like 13 million pages of documents related to the assassination of JFK.
Hmm.
Here's what happened. So your viewers understand the timeline of this. In 1964, the new president, Lyndon B. Johnson, establishes the Warren Commission, and the Warren Commission works for a year and generates the Warren Report, which is one 900-page summary volume and 26 supporting volumes of evidence. And within a year and a half, everybody is looking at this and going, we don't buy this. Like this does not make sense. First of all, what everybody focuses on, what strikes everybody from the beginning is that how in the world uh, does the most important person, most powerful person in the world get shot down in broad daylight by a supposed loser in life, Lee Harvey Oswald, all by himself with no help. And then 2 days later, many people who were adults and had TVs at the time watched the assassin get assassinated on live TV. So right away, you're thinking that's weird, right? That is a little bit more than just a crazy coincidence. What's going on? The public, for decades after the Warren Report, doubted the official narrative that the government tried to give to us. Uh, and and so in 1991, the film JFK comes out. There are follow up committees. The Warren Report in 1964, and then the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1976 establishes. I almost got out of order there. The House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1976 establishes that JFK was probably assassinated as the result of a conspiracy. They can't name a second shooter and they can't go into details. They just think that there's enough there to say, okay, it probably was a conspiracy. Uh, the all right, fast forward to 1991, and Oliver Stone's movie comes out. Now it's based on the case that Jim Garrison brought in New Orleans. Everybody knows this. Um, but the effect of that film, whether you believed Oliver Stone's version of the story or not, it and people will debate that, but it's important because uh, what happened as a result was the film goes global, and Oliver Stone does a press tour for a year after, and the public loses their ever loving minds again about the JFK case. That's what Oliver Stone's film did, no matter what part of it you believe or don't believe. So in 1992, Congress brings Oliver Stone to testify, and as a direct result of public pressure and his film, the JFK Records Act is passed by Congress. This is a law, a national law passed by Congress in 1992, signed into law by then President George H.W. Bush, and we'll get into that later. And then they also formed the ARRB, the Assassinations Records and Review Board, and that included, by the way, RFK and MLK because they
Mm.
were all grouped together. Okay, so the ARRB is going to review all of the investigations into this. The JFK Records Act is the law of the land in 1992, and it says that the president shall have the power to work with the National Archives to accelerate the release of all the files which had been sealed away in 1976 with the House Select Committee. So millions of pages, and the public can't see them. Your tax dollars have paid for these documents, and they're sealed away until the year 2035. And so what the JFK Records Act does in 1992 is say, okay, this is the law of the land. We're going to accelerate the release of these records. We're not going to wait 30 years. We can start and so they start releasing the files. And every president since George H.W. Bush has been under obligation of this law. Uh, Files are gradually released over time. In 2017, President number 45, Mr. Trump, in 2017, kicks that whole effort in the butt. And what he really did there was put pressure on the CIA and on the National Archives to speed up the process incredibly. So we got a large dump of files in 2017. Uh, we got another large dump of files. So Trump in the first term promises I'm going to release everything, and then at the very last minute, he gets pressure from the CIA to withhold a smaller group. Okay, the CIA says I should not release these last, so we're going to release all of these 17,000 pages, but we're not going to release these because the CIA thinks that harm, like there's still damage potential there. And we can talk about that. Okay, so, and then President Joe Biden in 2021, 2022, 2023, there are additional documents released. Remember, every president has been obligated under the law to do this since 1992. In 2023, President Biden really passes the buck back to the CIA and says, okay, so we've released all these things, and the CIA keeps holding out on us and saying, well, we can't release these because it could still damage the lives of people who are still alive. That's not very many people, by the way. Uh, and so he hands it back to the CIA and says the CIA will determine what files will be released. That's more or less like the fox asking the fox when we should paint the chicken house. Um, so, okay, that's where it stands. And then in 2023, 2024, Trump is running for a reelection, or a second term, number 47, and he campaigns on the promises, okay, I didn't do it in 2017, but now I'm going to do it. I'm going to release everything.
Mm.
Here we are today. Last week, it's only been 7 or 8 days. One of the executive orders that he signs is that he orders the Office of National Intelligence, ONI, and the CIA, FBI, and Attorney General, and everybody. He orders these people not to release the files. I want to be very clear on that point. No
mm.
matter what you hear, JFK did not release the files by simply signing his name. The executive order states these agencies will report back to the White House with a plan
Mm, mm.
to release the files within 15 days. And we don't know what that plan is. Okay, there's it. That's it. That's the rub. So my most recent videos on my TikTok have been trying to explain that. Oh, well, Trump released the files. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He ordered a plan within 15 days. And so today is February 2nd. And so the 15-day due date is for depending on how you're counting, either Thursday the 6th or Friday the 7th. But I created a live event and I'm promoting it now on my TikTok. A live event on TikTok, same time, 7 o'clock, but Friday night, the 7th. So that's in just about 7 days.
Yes, sir.
And what we're going to do is we're going to see if these agencies complied with the executive order. There could be a lot of news coming out about the JFK case. And with that, okay, to be clear, the JFK Records Act did not create a law to release the RFK assassination files or Dr. Martin Luther King assassination files. But in the executive order, Trump asked for those as well because it's in the national interest. And this is a thing that I happen to agree with him about. It is in the national interest to see the RFK files and the Martin Luther King files at the same time. Now they have 45 days on RFK and MLK.
Okay, okay.
15 days will be this Friday, this coming up Friday, to come up and what he's asked for is a plan. The CIA, let's be clear, the CIA could come back on Friday the 7th and say, all right, here's the plan. We're going to give you 3 files now, and we'll release the rest over the next year or 5 years or 10 years or never. Could be the plan.
Mm,
And so for people who ask me, what are we going to see in 7 days? The answer is, I don't know. The plan could also be release everything right now. All 3 assassinations right now.
mm, mm.
Boom, here they are. Then we'd have a lot of stuff to talk about, right, next week. Uh, but I don't think that, for some reason, I don't think that that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see a plan and we're going to see their reasoning why the plan is what the plan is. We already know what is in some of the secret files. We're going to have a pretty good idea whether or not the CIA is operating in good faith. And if you go to TikTok and you look at the videos on the last day or two, 48 hours worth or so, you're going to see the name George Joannides. I don't have a picture of him, but that's George Joannides, and everybody needs to post and repost the Joannides file. That's Joannides. Joannides. George. Who was George Joannides? Uh, well, there are 44 classified documents in his file,
Mm.
redacted, blocked out, can't read them. We know that that's a part of the 3,700 remaining documents in the pantheon of JFK documents.
Mm.
Everything has been declassified except for the last 3,700 or so of them. And we know what 44 of those are, the George Joannides file. So if the CIA, it's kind of a test, right? If among the files that they plan to release, if the George Joannides file uh, is released, then we'll have an idea that the CIA is acting on faith, um, good faith. But I guess we'll see, right?
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you very much. And you're giving us a lot of information, powerful. Thank you, everybody who's watching and showing love. Peace, Mimi, Naima. Thank you all for watching. Everybody showing you love from around the world. Shout out to Canada. People watching Canada as well as um, in the off the islands and in Mexico and just people who watch around the world. Thank you all very much. Can you break down for us who is George Joannides? Why is that important?
George Joannides uh, was a he was a CIA agent in 1963 and 1964. He ran the CIA's covert operations in Miami,
Mm,
where we find out later that there was an additional plot to kill Kennedy. But more specific to Lee Harvey Oswald, George Joannides supervised agents in the surveillance of Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963. And so Joannides knew what Oswald was doing. It's about foreknowledge, but George Joannides had agents covering Oswald before the assassination.
mm,
Now, I personally think that Oswald was a patsy, that he had a backstory created, that the CIA used him as an asset, that the FBI knew about it and covered it up. The Warren Commission, in their report, covered up the entire thing. But we're pretty certain that Oswald was a fake defector to Russia and part of a CIA operation that sent young Marines to infiltrate Russia in order to become double agents, to
mm,
get picked up by the KGB and be double agents against the United States. Lee Harvey Oswald never does actually defect. He spends 3 years, spinning his wheels in Minsk, in Russia. He marries a girl. He moves back to the United States, but he never officially gave up his U.S. citizenship, despite saying that's what he was going to do. When he gets back to the United States, nobody questions him. And in fact, the United States government loans him the money to get moved back to Dallas. He
mm,
spends the summer. He's separated from his wife Marina, and he spends the summer in New Orleans. And this is where Garrison's uh, investigation comes in. What was he doing in New Orleans the summer before November 22nd? Well, CIA, he was doing a bunch of cover operations for the CIA. Uh, George Joannides was in charge of all of that. And so,
mm,
without really knowing what the 44 documents say, we know that Joannides uh, was in charge of all of that. But then also, Joannides was the one who later, over a decade later, in 1976, deliberately misleads the House Select Committee on Assassinations, straight up lies to them, uh, as we find out later. Now, rest in peace, he retired something like 81 or something like that. And then, he has since passed away. It's not like we can actually question this guy. But that's how those files relate. And again, George Joannides, that's just kind of that's going to be a test to see if these files are really forthcoming or if they're going to continue to hide them.
wow, powerful, and thank you. This is great. And woo. Okay, so I wanted to ask you. We study, people watching this podcast, all the affiliates there. Not only President John F. Kennedy assassination, of course, Malcolm X assassination, the RFK assassination, but Dr. Martin Luther King there's a documentary on Hulu called Dr. Martin Luther King and the FBI Files, and it was showing how he was being recorded and oh, what, how does this all correlate? What is the importance of recording him, and how does it, like you said, how it lined up with President JFK, RFK, MLK? Why were these people being recorded, and why is that a coincidence that it happened like bang bang, like like back to back?
Okay, let me state that I am not at all an expert on either RFK or the MLK assassination, but I do think there's a correlation, and I think the thing in common and you would have to include Malcolm X in this also. The thing that those four leaders had in common was they were a threat to the status quo.
mm.
And let's face it, they got away with it with JFK. Why would they? Why? How would how would their behavior not be conditioned to like, oh, we managed to take care of JFK. We should probably go ahead and take care of RFK and MLK also. There is definitely a correlation because,
Mm.
frankly, the CIA operated as a uh, sort of a I can't think of the Latin term for it, but they operated as their own form of government. They were above the law, and and they justified it by saying what's good for national security needs to be covert. There's no way that this falls under any regular law because the national security and secrets are not regular. The public cannot know this for the good of the public. And that's what I think the common thread is there between the four assassinations, but especially RFK and MLK. Man, I hope we find out. I hope that there are just as many stunning revelations about uh, RFK and MLK. Now, RFK, I'm a little bit, not to switch topics, but most people my age or older, like, I don't know, maybe my parents and perhaps yours, uh, or anybody watching, all were told that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. And we were told that Sirhan acted alone in killing Bobby Kennedy, and we were told that James Earl Ray acted alone when assassinating Dr. King. So as I occasionally step outside the JFK box, I did not realize, for example, Bobby Kennedy, my parents were, and yours perhaps, all learned that Sirhan, Palestinian immigrant, was the one, and he's still alive, by the way. He's 84 or something. And
Mm.
he's been in prison. He's been in prison this entire time. He's been denied parole four times. But there are some problems with that entire case. Sirhan might well have been influenced or under the influence of the CIA's MK Ultra plan. And I don't know if this applies to James Earl Ray either. I'm just saying Sirhan did not, we know Sirhan did not act alone. And when I'm a big fan of Dr. Cyril Wecht, and he's on, rest in peace. He appears everywhere on YouTube when this subject comes up. But I learned from him. Okay, I'll just ask you, in the same way I would ask my parents or anybody else. For those that remember Bobby Kennedy, all right, he's just won the Democratic nomination. Okay, he's moving on. He's campaigning for president. This is June 1968. Okay, and so he has a rally at the Ambassador Hotel, and the crowd is all around him, and he's like thanking everybody. We've seen this tape over and over again. And so they exit out the kitchen and back behind stage and out through the kitchen, and there's Sirhan, okay, Palestinian immigrant, standing right there and by some tables there in the kitchen. How close? I'll ask you, how close was Sirhan to Bobby Kennedy when he shot?
It's pretty close, correct? It's pretty close, correct?
Well, 3 feet, 4 feet,
Okay, that's what I thought.
six
That's what I
feet.
thought.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and that's a pretty standard answer. That's probably how my parents would answer also, because of the official government narrative. But would it surprise you to learn uh, it's right there in the government's own autopsy report? You can look this up for yourself. The shot that killed Robert F. Kennedy was from behind at a downward angle at a distance of 1 to 1.5 inches.
Mm,
I'll say that again. Sirhan's out here in front. He's carrying an 8-shot revolver. The audio recording of the incident, there are 13 identifiable gunshots. Sirhan's only responsible for 8. There's bullet holes all over the place in that kitchen that they find later. But in the autopsy, the government's autopsy doctor says RFK's fatal wound was from behind 1 to 1.5 inches.
mm.
And when people hear that, it can be transformative because suddenly everything that we've been told our whole lives has been not real. It was a narrative crafted uh, for the public. And corporate media, of course, complicit in helping that narrative flow through. It's common. Sirhan. Okay, whether he acted alone or not, is he still guilty? Sure. I mean, does he deserve parole? Maybe. I mean, poor guy's done his time. Okay, and I didn't mean to get all off on that RFK tangent.
Oh
And
no, we can't do it.
I am much less able to address James Earl Ray and Dr. Martin Luther King. Uh, but having said that, that's the common theme is that really it's better if you don't know because we think that this is the government saying we think that maybe you can't handle the truth of the matter. So
Yes.
anyway,
Great. Okay, great job. I just want to
you,
read some of the comments that people are showing, watching all around the world. Blaxican the Traveler, excellent information. Thank you very much, Brother Musa. He said he never believed in the long gunman theory. Thank you for knowledge. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you also everybody who's in the comments and showing love. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, after this question, we have a slideshow. Everybody's watching. Please stay tuned to the slideshow. He was there. Like you got to see the whole breakdown. If you all aren't on TikTok, I try to tell my sister stop acting like aunties and keep up with TikTok because this is information fast, quick, in a hurry. But everybody, please go once again to JFK 60 years later. It's a great, um, just an amazing TikTok channel. But we want to do a slideshow after this question. I wanted to ask you, sir, Jack Ruby and dealing with that, who did he have something to do with it? Is the mob a part of it? Did it have something to do with the Bay of Pigs and all of these different theories? Can you help explain that to us?
yeah, I think it's clear that Jack Ruby it may very well be one of the keys to the whole thing. He doesn't behave. He's kind of a weirdo. Okay, respect, rest in peace. But he was a little he was a little bit of a weirdo. First of all, he stalks Lee Harvey Oswald all weekend. When you really start digging into this thing, one of the questions that comes up is did Ruby and Oswald know each other? And at the moment, after 2 years of looking at it, I am on the side of, yeah, they knew each other.
Mm,
One of when you a little plug here, if you do go to the TikTok channel, I have a playlist with all the videos that have gotten 1 million or more views, and one of those is footage of Oswald at the midnight press conference where Ruby is standing in the back of the room.
mm,
Okay. Understand that they frequented the same restaurants. They did not live really that far apart from each other in Officer Tippett's Oak Cliff neighborhood. Um, but Ruby stalks Oswald all weekend. He's at Parkland Hospital for some reason, a half an hour after the ambulance has arrived. Okay, he's there hanging out. Then, and that's Friday. He's hanging out in the police station all Friday night. He's at the midnight press conference Friday night. He's hanging out most of the day on Saturday, and then he just happens to uh, slip into the garage where they're getting ready to put Oswald in the car, and he looks like one of the reporters, but then he just steps out, and there is a moment I think where they're walking. Uh, Oswald is handcuffed to Detective Lavelle, and they're walking out, and Oswald looks to his left, and I personally, people will argue with me, but I personally think Oswald sees Ruby coming in that garage basement area there just before he's supposed to get in the car. Uh, um, so I Ruby is a known mafioso. He's small time. He's a small. He wants to be a big timer, but he's a small timer. Um, he goes to New Orleans before November 22nd. So I don't know what's up with New Orleans, but Oswald, David Ferry, and Clay Shaw. Jack Ruby was there too. Supposedly on business, but whatever. We'll see. Jack Ruby spends most of Saturday, a lot of Saturday, making 27 different phone calls. And when you look at the phone records of Ruby's calls on Saturday, they're all to Chicago, and they all read like, the Soprano family cast of characters.
Mm.
Uh, they're all mob ties. Uh, Now, Chicago, uh, and I'll just take a minute to say this: Chicago it is integral to the study of the assassination, as is Miami, because there were actually three plots to assassinate JFK.
Mm.
And for your viewers who want a book that nobody else has yet, I will. I hope you can see this. It might be backwards on the screen. This is a copy of "The Plot to Kill President Kennedy in Chicago," 2 weeks before. Now, did the mob orchestrate all of the plots? No, I think rogue elements of the CIA did. But this, we know that the CIA and the mafia were playing nice together on a lot of things. CIA would turn around and use the mafia the same way the mafia would use, underbosses and soldiers and all that. So the mafia is doing their thing. But sure, there were no reason for them to not be connected with the CIA for certain operations. To get For Ruby to get to Oswald, okay. Bottom line, Ruby's acting under orders. Yes, that probably came through the CIA down through the mafia. What the mafia got out of it, uh, I don't know, but they had their own motives. Mafia was had plenty of motives to want to see JFK gone and Oswald silenced. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that's it. Ruby's acting under mafia orders. Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, sir. Well, okay. Well, now before we do the slideshow, everybody stay tuned. We got this amazing slideshow that's coming up. You just mentioned, can we talk about what took place in Chicago? I've never heard of this. 2 weeks before the actual assassination.
Sure. And I'll just give you a sneak peek. Um, if I can find, yep, here it is. I'm just gonna go ahead and share this real quick. Um, are you? Let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. All right, this is a gentleman right here, Abraham Bolden. Can you see this? Okay.
Yes,
Do I
sir.
need to make it bigger?
No, sir. That's fine. We can see it.
Okay. Uh, Joshua, you need to read about this guy,
Mm.
this gentleman, Abraham Bolden. You know who he is?
No, sir.
Abraham Bolden is the very first African American Secret Service agent.
Mm.
He was appointed by JFK. He was in the field office in Chicago. He gets a call 2 weeks prior to November 22nd from a person who would only identify himself as Lee
Mm,
and is warned of a plot in Chicago. Turns out, now I don't have pictures for all of this, but there was a second patsy. There was a guy that they eventually arrested named Thomas Arthur Valley. Thomas Arthur Valley had a very similar profile to Lee Harvey Oswald. And in fact, when you put the pictures of the two of them together, they even kind of look like they could be related.
mm,
Same height, build, hairline, that whole thing. But Thomas Arthur Valley is a guy that you don't hear about a lot because they managed to arrest him. So Abraham Bolden is the Secret Service agent who takes the tip and tries to warn the field office. Hardly any avail. But eventually, they do find a hotel room uh, and four Cubans, or of Cuban origin, with a lot of firepower uh, stuck in their hotel room. And come to find out, Thomas Arthur Valley is like Oswald, an ex-marine who was stationed at Atsugi, Japan, at our naval base there, and gets sent to Chicago and somehow manages to find work in a high rise, multiple story office building overlooking what would be the presidential motorcade route in Chicago 2 weeks
mm,
before Dallas. And
mm,
Abraham Bolden, the first African American Secret Service agent, foils that plot. He is later framed unfairly and sent to prison, and later, just in the last 4 years, pardoned by President Joe Biden.
mm.
And so this picture that I'm sharing is a picture of Abraham Bolden in 2022 after receiving the Presidential Freedom Medal from President Biden, at least a full pardon after the fact. He's holding a picture of himself, his younger self in 1963. And that is, hey, listen, I know I'm an average white dude, but this is some important uh, Black History Month stuff, right? We just
Yes,
started right in February, right?
yes,
I
sir.
don't care if nobody else commemorates it, okay? I don't care what the president says. It's Black History Month, and this is some Black history right here.
Mm, mm.
This gentleman foiled the plot against Kennedy in Chicago. So anyway, that's my story on that.
Thank you. That's great. I never knew. We definitely. I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but 95% of us didn't know about this story.
Abraham Bolden is his name, and I encourage you to search him on the internet, man, because that is a fantastic story. Anyway, that is the book that I'm reading by author Vince Palomara. Now, Vince Palomara is an expert on the Secret Service and wrote this book. He's got several books, and he's on TikTok.
Mm,
You can find Vince. He's on my list. He's one of the few people that I follow is Vince Palomara. He's an expert on the Secret Service, and he sent me this book that was very gracious of him, and it's all about the second plot to kill Kennedy and Abraham Bolden in Chicago 2 weeks before November 22nd. So I don't get any money for these advertisements. I'm just telling you, if you want to read unread history uh, and the history of Abraham Bolden, there are books like this out there.
beautiful. Yes, sir. Okay. Now we want to go to your the slideshow of what you experienced when you got to see the grassy knoll. What was it like? Was there a surreal spirit or energy when you went
Oh
there?
my God. Hey, people who have been there before um, kind of agree that there absolutely is, especially when you've been planning this trip for 2 years and you finally make it. and you're just kind of overwhelmed. You're so happy to be there, even though it is pretty somber. Um, it's a moment, right? We you take them. I'm not going to say spiritual, but maybe it is. It's definitely emotional. And so I got there, and I this picture is of me standing on the second X on Elm Street. This is the spot where the fatal shot hit JFK, and many other people have taken this picture. I am not original, but this was new to me. This was deeply personal to me, and so that is just one of the a few. And I'll blow through some of these really quick, and you stop me if you want, but I'll just blow through some of them. So the floor. This is the view from the sixth floor window, and I hope you can see this well enough. Yeah, the windows are 60 years old, and so they're kind of a mess, right? Uh, Tough to see through there. If you really want a good look, you got to go up here to the seventh floor, and that's what the view from the seventh floor looks like. Do you see that fountain?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. That's where Howard Brennan was sitting. That is where Howard Brennan looked up at the sixth floor window and said that he could allegedly pick out Lee Harvey Oswald and identify him. But we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Okay, in the sixth floor museum, uh, so the picture of the sixth floor museum in 1963 juxtaposed against the picture of the same entryway in present day. Here's another one. This is Dealey Plaza. The black and white picture is what it looked like in 1963. It's the same approximate angle. You can tell by the lines in the road, juxtaposed against what it looks like today. Um, I will skip that for a second, and I will go straight to one thing that you cannot do. I was telling you before we got started. One thing you cannot do on TikTok is show pictures of weapons of any kind, even if it is a historic one.
Mm, mm,
But this is this is the 40s model Italian made Mannlicher Carcano, perhaps the world's worst shoulder weapon. Very clunky, not very accurate, not very effective. And the one in the museum, which we're looking at now, that's not the actual one, but it is a basically a duplicate. It's not a fake. It's just got a different serial number, but basically that's it. That's the one. Okay. Uh, you can't talk about the weapon uh, on TikTok. It, to me, I grew up with firearms and went hunting with my dad and all of those things. So I'm not a complete novice. But to me, this telescopic scope mounted on this rifle, uh, I believe to be set for a left-handed person.
mm.
So anyway, when you visit the museum, this area is behind glass. You can't actually set foot in there, but you can get up pretty close to it. And the boxes of books that are stacked there are not the actual boxes, but a pretty good representation of what it would have looked like in Oswald's day. And this is the area of the sixth floor where they actually found the rifle. That's why it's over here on this side. And those boxes, they would have found this rifle in between these stacks of boxes here. So that's why they have it displayed like that. Just going in order here, we'll come back to the museum. But everybody wants to know about the picket fence. Was there a shooter behind the picket fence? I personally think that there was. So
Mm.
when you go to Dallas and Dealey Plaza, one of the, in addition to taking a picture in the middle of the street with busy weekday traffic on it, sneaking out there and taking a picture, you also climb up here behind the picket fence and take a look at what it looks like over there. So that's what I did. Uh, And of course, these are not the same boards from 1963. This fence has been replaced 4 or 5 times since 1963. And every time they replace it, people still get up on it and write graffiti on it, as you can see that they have done here. Now I'm behind the picket fence and I'm looking at Elm Street which would have been the view from a the view that a second assassin would have had. And there's the graffiti. Don't believe what they tell you. That is present day graffiti. These are new-ish boards, just within. I think this particular set of picket boards is less than 6 or 7 years old.
Mm.
But that's what it looks like. And yeah, this is a huge emotional moment for me. This is with my head over the picket fence, looking at the X in the middle of the street, which you can't quite make out there, but that's pretty much what it would have looked like. Okay, more views behind the picket fence. You mentioned Jack Ruby. There's his hat,
Mm. Mm.
and that's the hat that's in the famous picture. You know, by the way, if you're planning on going to Dallas and Dealey Plaza and don't want to see, you don't want spoilers, you don't need to ruin the surprise. Maybe stop watching now because I'm showing you pictures I took within the museum. Here's the sniper's nest. There's a bench. So I was just kind of sitting there. This area is walled off like the other area.
Yes, sir.
So it's behind glass, but the sun is peeking through, and you get a pretty good view of the sniper's nest. One of the things that you discover immediately is just how small that space is. So this row of boxes, whether this is the approximate placement of boxes, so that's the approximate amount of floor space that Lee Harvey Oswald, if it was him or anybody else, would have had to probably kneel or sit. The idea that anybody could see him standing up at this window is crazy because the window was only half open. And if you look really closely, you see how close the bottom of the window is actually to the floor. In order for a rifle to poke through that window, that sniper would have been seated or kneeling, which is why he used these boxes as kind of a prop or armrest. Let me get to that real quick. Maybe I got a better. Okay, that's a little better picture. Maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. Did it just get bigger for you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, see those three boxes on the floor? Uh, that those aren't the real boxes, but in that box that's kind of in the sill, you can kind of see the reflection. There's a hole cut in the front of the box, and there is an Earth Cam web camera in there. And you can go to Earth Cam, Google it. You can go to Earth Cam and get their app, and you can see a live picture from that camera 24/7. You can also go down to the street to the fountain, the picture I showed you before, and look up at this and take a selfie. So that's what I did, of course, because I'm a nerd. Uh, you can't get in any closer than that because of the glass.
Mm.
But
Mm.
for sure, that hardwood floor is original. And then this is the opposite side, the opposite corner. Okay, so let's be clear. This is the eastern corner, and it's facing north. Okay, and then Oswald runs across the room, hides the rifle among these boxes, and because the elevator isn't working, this is the staircase that he allegedly runs down. Final shot at 12:30. He's seen in the lunchroom 90 seconds later. So he literally allegedly fires the last shot and then runs and hides the rifle in this group of boxes and then escapes down the staircase, 6 floors, with nobody else seeing him, and arrives in the lunchroom where the building supervisor and the police officer first find him. It's one of the things that I'm highly skeptical of is the idea that Oswald had enough time to hide the rifle and get down the stairs and not be out of breath when he gets uh, to the lunchroom. This is the corner of Dealey Plaza. This is the triple overpass where the railroad tracks run across this. This corner right here. This is the corner where Ricochet hits James Tagg's cheek. He was
Mm.
actually the third casualty. The first shot misses. The first shot misses, hits the concrete. The concrete chips off and hits James Tagg all the way over here. This is many yards in front to the left of where the second X on the street is. This is the plaque on the front of the Texas School Book Depository. It's now called the Dallas County Records. It's the Dallas County building now. But people, this plaque has been replaced 8 or 10 times because people keep uh, scratching. Oops, I just lost it. Sorry. They keep scratching the word allegedly to highlight it. So
Mm.
my friend said they just reorder and rehang this plaque every 8 or 10 years. My friend and I took a tour of the route that Oswald took to escape, and where he ends up being arrested is the Texas Theater. The Texas Theater is in Oak Cliff. It's really only a couple, 3 miles away. Oswald uh, gets on a bus and then in a cab gets dropped off at his rooming house, picks up his jacket and his revolver, which he did not already have on him for some reason. I'm never going to understand that, but he comes here to the Texas Theater. The Texas Theater, still in operation, shows movies, has shows, but this picture is taken from the vantage point where Oswald was sitting. And of course, I was super lucky to get inside there because it was closed to the public at that moment. But I was honored and privileged to have my picture taken in the seat or very close where Oswald was arrested at about 1:15, 1:30 on Friday, November 22nd. There's a lot of talk on my TikTok channel about the Zapruder film, so I just want to point this out. And then I think I'm done. I think I've hit all my high points. The the film frames that you see on the right hand side of this picture, they're kind of lighter in color. Uh, that's the original Zapruder film, and then the frames in the center and the frame on the left, as you look at it, those are the Secret Service copies. There's a lot of confusion out there about the original film. And when you watch my TikTok channel, you'll see me mention this a lot because you can go on YouTube and TikTok and everywhere else and search the Zapruder film, and you're going to see a slightly worse copy every time. Do you see on the left and the center that in between the sprocket holes are just blacked out? Like there's no visual information there. But on the original copy, on the right hand side, this is the original Zapruder film as it is archived in the National Archives. There's an extra bit of information in between those sprocket holes. The sprocket holes are literally what the machine, it was a wind up camera. You would wind it up and it would run for a few seconds, but they use those sprocket holes to move the film through the camera.
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
People talking all the time about, oh, I seen the real video. I seen the real video. It wasn't video. It was 8 millimeter film in a state of the art home movie camera that was Zipper bought in 1962. And a poor guy, super unlucky to catch the world's most infamous murder on his camera. But those 26 seconds are probably the most important piece of evidence, and they've been looked at every which way. But you can't possibly tell me. And a lot of people in the comments try to say, "Well, I've seen this video and I've seen that video, and I seen the one where the driver did it." I'm like, "No, you haven't. No, you haven't."
Okay, can we show your face during this
Yeah,
point here? Okay, we want to stay right here with the driver. That was my next point. And thank you so much. I want everybody is showing you love for that great PowerPoint presentation and all of the slides. That's phenomenal. We coming back to your trip. Thank you, Sister Amina Hanan. Everybody who was uh, she said she read Mr. Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza's 4 years ago, and he's been a frequent guest on the radio in Chicago. So that's a good thing. So she's familiar with,
excellent.
yes, sir. Okay, so we wanted to ask you. So I saw a YouTube or documentary on YouTube called "Every Rich Man, Every Trick is a Rich Man." Something about a rich man's trick, but it was dealing with President John F. Kennedy, and it was something.
Everything is a rich man's trick.
Everything is a rich man's trick. Yes, sir. That changed my life. It was one of the top 5 documentaries I've ever seen. And I was just like, whoa, I don't know how much is true, how much is I didn't know what was going on, but they laid it out pretty well. Whatever the information was, I was like, it could be. You know what I'm saying? Uh, but it made me want to question many things that I want to come back to the second point. But the first point, since you brought up the driver, so you're saying is that a possibility or no?
No, no, full stop. The driver didn't do it. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. Maybe my light is reflecting. You're going to have to go to my channel and watch. But there's the driver right there,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
both hands in front of him. The thing that people refer to as a weapon is light, the sun reflecting off the sheen in the guy's hair.
Okay. Okay.
The driver's not holding a weapon. I don't care who you are. That didn't happen. And this is frame 312. And the fatal head wound comes at frame 313. And this is frame 312. The frames were moving through that camera. Remember the sprocket holes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The frames are moving through that camera at a rate of 18 of those frames per second. And so frame 312 is 1/18th of a second before the fatal head wound. And the driver's hands are in front of him. Now that's pretty tough to do on a Zoom like this, but I've hit this point. Matter of fact, on the TikTok, I have a playlist called the Limo Driver. I encourage you to go watch those and don't be sucked in. And now look, Rich Man's Trick. You and I would easily agree that that was an entertaining 3.5 hours.
Yes, sir.
But that's all it is entertainment. When people refer to it as a documentary, I kind of bristle at that. I do not call that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Uh, I do not call that a documentary.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, I call that infotainment. And that gentleman that wrote and directed and narrated that entire film does lay out a compelling case. And he says that there were 8 shooters in Dealey Plaza that day, and he names them all and he tells you where they were. Uh, but then at the end, and this, for okay, and he hits that really super early in that film, and then gets back to it later in the film with all this other stuff in between. That is a mixture of truth and speculation. There's no doubt that some of the things that he presents in that film is true, but not enough to make it a documentary because he also includes it. I mean, okay, what he says, I'll save you 3.5 hours. What he says is the fatal shot came from the storm drain. That
Mm,
the
mm,
guys down in the sewer, and that I didn't have it for this slideshow, but you can watch my videos where I'm in Dallas and I get down on my hands and knees and I look inside the storm drain and then I take pictures at the level of the sidewalk of the storm drain and the X. And here's the thing, perfect angle for the frontal shot, maybe, except for the problem that you're confined in a really small space. And what does that do? That limits your vision. Okay, these aren't real proportions, right? But basically, what they're saying is this guy is looking out an aperture in the street. Okay, sidewalk over here, street right here. Guy is looking out through the sewer here, and the problem is that your view, you only have this much view. So you would have to be pointing your weapon and firing at the exact perfect moment that the limo passed by. And that is, if you have ever, uh, for whatever reason, ever had the chance to fire a long rifle for whatever reason, you know that it doesn't happen that quickly and that if you blink, you've missed it. But you're talking about the span of time at 11 miles an hour. That limo would have been like, shoop, according to how much space he had to see. All right. So the storm drain is out. There's no way I believe that. You'll never convince
Okay.
me. And but Rich Man's Trick, man, yeah. I mean, just like JFK, Oliver Stone's movie, he got a lot of things right. He didn't get everything right. Oliver Stone was closer to reality than Rich Man's Trick was. But I know
Okay.
people all the time asking me, did I watch Rich Man's Trick? Yep, I have. Do I buy it? Yeah, it's shaky. Look, if you really want to watch uh, some eye-opening stuff, I'll name a couple. JFK made a follow-up to his movie a couple of years ago. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's called uh, oh crap, JFK Revisited. Start with that.
Yes, sir.
Even if you got to pay, even if you got to pay $4.99 for it, start with that. JFK Revisited from 2022 or 2021 or something. Okay, that film, Joshua, that film will open your eyes. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
now I know if you have Paramount Plus as a streaming service, then consider the 7 day free trial to try Paramount Plus, specifically to watch the movie JFK, What the Doctors Saw, and that is a movie that deals with the Parkland doctors and how none of them agreed with the autopsy photos. All of the doctors at Parkland, and in this documentary, 5 or 6 of them get reunited, 60 years later. And they talk about what they saw that day and the discrepancy between what they saw and what the official narrative in the Warren report was. Every single doctor that had a chance to see JFK in Parkland Hospital on that day, and it's well over a dozen of them, all describe the wound in JFK's head as being back here, back right, the occipital bone region of the skull, back here, to a man, and some of the nurses. They all describe the wound being back here, which would imply a front entry room wound. That's a huge debate. JFK was shot from the back, shot from the front. Okay, well, look, what if he was shot from both and back?
Mm, mm,
What
mm.
if there were more than 3 shots? Not as many as 8 shooters, like Rich Man's Trick says, but at least 3, including one behind the picket fence where I was standing. Okay, that would explain multiple bullet types, and it would explain some of the bullet fragmentation. But it would also support the case that the doctors in Parkland really did see what they saw. Anyway, that's JFK, What the Doctor Saw, on Paramount Plus, and so I can recommend those two actual documentaries to your viewers.
Wonderful. And I wrote those down. We're going to watch those. We have a few more questions for you, but I just want to let people know. Thank you, Bro Musa. Said, great perspective. He doesn't believe that the driver did it. He still believe Oswald was a patsy. Okay, so I'm going to stay there. So on some of the footage that I've seen, it seems as if um, President Kennedy did grab at his throat, and when it shows uh, the first lady at that time, she's jumping and putting the head together and things of that nature. Do you think she knows that she really knew what happened? Um, and like according to the footage that's saying Bobby Kennedy or RFK said that's not my brother when they saw how bad it was done to him and things of that nature. Do you believe that? Let's start with the first lady putting everything together, and then do you believe that the same body that when he got on Air Force One, by the time it got by the time it landed, is that the body? Is that the skull, or was there a switch? What do you think?
Okay, on the First Lady, one of the craziest things that people have come at me with on this channel has been the idea that Jackie did it, that it was Jackie. Are you out of your ever loving mind? The
Yeah.
poor lady's in shock. The driver did it, and Jackie was scared, and that's why she was climbing on the back of the car was to get away from the driver. No,
Okay. Okay.
no, we know why she was on the trunk of the car. She was picking up a piece of skull and she handed it to a doctor in the Parkland Hospital.
Mm.
So no, Jackie had no idea what was going on. That's ridiculous. Okay, so fast forward to by law, the autopsy should have been done right there uh, in Parkland in Dallas, but the Secret Service, in violation of that law, says no. This is the president. We're putting him on Air Force One and we're taking him home. That's what they do. We know that there were two caskets, and for whatever reason, the casket that was loaded on Air Force One wasn't the same one that showed up 15 minutes sooner at Bethesda Naval Hospital for the autopsy. And so now I don't, others can speak much better to that, but I am concerned with the two caskets thing. And I'm also concerned with the autopsy. Those doctors, I'm not talking about the Parkland doctors, the Bethesda doctors, were not forensic pathologists, no experience. And we know this because what they did, which never would have been done in an actual by an actual forensic pathologist, what they never would have done was remove JFK's brain first. But that's what they did. Those doctors, again, rest in peace. They were Navy doctors. They were operating under orders. And you need to understand that the military is running this autopsy at this point. JFK's brain is removed and then goes missing. So we're never going to know what the actual trajectory path and bullet fragmentation would have been in JFK's brain. Sorry, we're just never going to know that. Okay, certainly would have been nice to know. Certainly would have answered a bunch of questions. Okay, and then on the body double thing, I am skeptical. Uh, the the murder that happened at approximately 1 p.m. or so, half an hour after JFK, of police officer J.D. Tippit around the area of Oswald's rooming house. I went there, and first of all, it's too long to have walked. We know Oswald was in a cab. He is confronted. Oswald's back on. He goes into his rooming house and he gets his jacket and his revolver, and he's on foot. We know that J.D. Tippit he drives his police car through the neighborhood. He sees Oswald walking and calls him over. Uh, and Oswald, if it was Oswald, and there's disagreement on that, is leaning up against the police car, but there are never any fingerprints of Oswald found on the police car. And then Tippit gets out and is shot 4 times by whoever the murderer was. And again, I'm not 100% certain it was Oswald. No matter. There are people who have the theory. You asked about the body double. I'm coming to it, I promise.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Uh,
sir.
People like to speculate that JD Tippit was killed for the express purpose of having a body double. He, when you put pictures of them, and I have a video on this, of course. Uh, when you put pictures of them side by side, they have it's a passing resemblance. And in fact, JD Tippit's nickname was JFK because other people called out his resemblance to JFK. When you watch the 9-hour documentary called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, which was on, it was a History Channel documentary in 7 or 8 different parts, and it's scattered across YouTube now. So
Okay.
you can find it. The Men Who Killed Kennedy. In one section of that film, he puts forward the theory that they grabbed a mortician and ushered him on to Air Force One in order to, you know, to basically do mortician type surgery on Kennedy so that they could pass off. Now, did they replace JFK with JD Tippit in the casket? I'm not going that far. And I'm not agreeing with the mortician theory. And we know the brain is missing. That's fact. Uh, but as far as using JD Tippit as a body double, I am not convinced. Yes, JFK's laying in state in the rotunda, and Jackie and Bobby are there in a private moment, and Jackie uh, cuts off a lock of JFK's hair and then says to Bobby, "It doesn't look like him." But I think that that's probably the kind of thing that a lot of people would say after viewing their loved one in a casket, especially after a traumatic head wound. She was I it's mysterious, right? It's just another thread in this spool, in this web of just little tiny things that don't add up. But the idea that Jackie was at that moment saying to Bobby, "That's not JFK." No, I'm not. I'm not
Okay.
going far.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, hope that answered that.
All right. Wonderful. And thank you for breaking this down for us all. Okay. The next question that we have for you is um, we covered the driver, we covered the grassy knoll. What we want to know on a human side, what made and what makes President John F. Kennedy so compelling to the public back then, in the 60s, even all the way to 2025, where we're discussing him now. What was it about him that made him so cared? Was it his charisma? Was it what he stood for? Or was it the fact that he was assassinated while in office?
Yeah, I mean, there are several things, but what what we're stuck with is an unfulfilled promise, a dream within our grasp, never realized. Perhaps that's over romanticizing it, but we're never going to know. It might have been two terms, 8 years of JFK, and then 8 years of Bobby,
Mm, mm.
and 8 years of Teddy. That's a dynasty. And of course, the covert side of the government can't have that. 16, even if forget Teddy, 8 years of JFK and 8 years of Bobby, that's 16 years. That's an eternity in political terms. JFK brought so much excitement back to the White House because of a bunch of old white guys up till that point. Here was a younger guy, and he was Catholic. He had a beautiful wife and a beautiful family. And he was super interested in advancing, although it was signed under Lyndon Johnson. JFK was instrumental in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and getting that. Johnson said we're going to live up to that after JFK passed. So the Civil Rights Act and was just the beginning. He was going to pull us out of Vietnam and a bunch of other things. Like if equality for all. He was a Democrat. He was a progressive, perhaps maybe the most progressive, certainly since FDR. Uh, had everybody's interest in mind, and he was young at 43, and we didn't get to see how that might have changed the world. Now, I do get asked why I spend so much time talking about this. Why my TikTok channel has 3,000 videos about one subject, and and I get just by way of summing it all up. Why does it matter? 62 years later. And people ask me that all the time. Why? Hey, let them rest in peace. None of that stuff. We got enough going on. We got enough problems in this world. Why are we talking about some people and some documents from 60 years ago? What does any of it matter? Uh, there are two reasons that I give. And the first is that moment in history, especially if you enjoy history and United States history, think about it. That moment in history changed the way forever how we got our news. Most people in 1963 would have gotten their news from their favorite and possibly more than one newspaper they would read. Or they'd go to the movies and they would see a newsreel, which was a little bit more like watching, 10 minutes worth of news on Saturday after a whole week of. So if you weren't reading you got your news from the newspaper or you weren't getting the news. November 22nd changes all that. Uh, Cameras show up, at the police station like at 1:30, 2 o'clock or so. The world converges on a single point in Dallas. And the era of as it happens, raw live TV coverage begins
Mm,
on that afternoon, forever changing our world. And people are glued to their televisions and it's on 24/7 and not until possibly 9/11, 50 years later, 40 years later. Are people as glued to their TV as they were that weekend, culminating with the assassin being assassinated on live TV?
mm,
Profound, profoundly changing. The second reason that we study this assassination, and truthfully RFK and MLK as well, is because no one believed that was the moment we stopped trusting our government. Full
mm,
stop. The Warren Report is put forward with the specific intent to sell the country on the idea. And it was, and we know this. There was in a memo. There was no question what the motive was of the Warren Report. Sell the narrative of Oswald acted alone in order to, national security, to prevent war, whatever. They had their reasons. The public needs to be convinced, is what they said, that Oswald acted alone, or a lot of bad, shit could follow. And so that's what the Warren Report did, and nobody believed it. And as recently as I haven't polled anybody today, but in 2013, Gallup does a poll and says that the percentage of people who believe that the Warren Commission left out or got wrong a lot of things, that there actually was a conspiracy and that Oswald did not act alone, that number is like 61%
mm.
to like 39% who still say, nah, you guys are all a bunch of wacky conspiracy theorists, and the Warren Commission provided all the proof that you need to know. Case closed. No need to talk about it. Nothing to see here. But I would put a poll in the field, Joshua, on your podcast. I'm not right now. I'm just saying.
Yes, sir.
One question. One question. When it comes to the JFK assassination, do you believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? And I promise you results of 65 to even 70%. People do not believe that anymore. And in today's political environment, especially, what's real? What's propaganda? Why do we believe what the government tells us? That as badly as they want us to believe, why do we believe it? When we can see with our own eyes what's happening and being told that what we're seeing isn't real. That's not how you see it with your own eyes, but that's not happening. That's not real. Don't believe anybody but me. I'm the only one with the truth. When you see it with your own eyes, that is why we study this case.
Beautiful. We have just two more questions for our illustrious guest, but I just wanted to say one thing to everybody who's watching. Thank you all who's all around the world. You mentioned earlier, you spoke of Dr. Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, where I wanted to just connect why President John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X are absolutely connected with the assassinations and the timing. It was, for those who are watching, they are familiar. Many of the guests have seen people. I've interviewed people who were with Malcolm X the day he made the statement about President John F. Kennedy's assassination, which led to him then being silenced and then later removed from his position as the national spokesman in the Nation of Islam because he spoke out against the against he wasn't supposed to make a comment about President John F. Kennedy because of the climate. He made a reference, then was then punished. Muhammad Ali's all connected to that because then he said you can't speak against your leader, you violated the code. All of these things are connected. Uh,
Yep.
so it's very it's all locked in and tied in together. The lone, like I said, the lone shooter. Same thing with Malcolm X. Was there a conspiracy? Was it one person? Did they rent out the Audubon ballroom before he was assassinated? Days before, rehearse everything. Were the police involved? Was he getting mouth to mouth from government agent or police? I mean, it's all. But I enjoy this kind of history. So we're locked in. Just wanted to put that out there to everybody who's watching the show. Some of these similarities that's going on. We later this month we have someone coming in to speak about Dr. Martin Luther King and the government and why those files are so important, tying it back to President Kennedy. It's a great thing. Got to put you in a hot seat. Would you come back for a part two one day after you do your live?
Yeah, absolutely. If we can work out the time, uh, and we'll talk about it. I think I should put together a more professionally polished presentation. As much, I mean, I would use it on my. I don't do a podcast. There are plenty of other podcasters, but we'll see what happens with the TikTok app. But I need to take these pictures and make my own presentation. Again, this none of this is original, and you could find every bit of this yourself on the internet. I tried to provide a forum for people to discuss and to make their own, express their own opinions. That's really the community that I've built over on that app. But I've enjoyed myself very much. You've been very gracious. And so the answer is, yeah, let's find a time, uh, some evening. It would have to be an evening.
Yes,
And
sir.
we'll do it again and bring even more questions.
Oh, absolutely. Because I wanted to ask you about, give you some time to go over, but Marilyn Monroe in the connection between the two brothers. Did they have anything to do with anything? Was she about to say something? But we people want to know, like myself who studied, these all of these different theories. We would like to know. But I wanted to ask you, on a lighter note, what type of music do you enjoy listening to, sir?
Okay. uh, Listen, I am by trade. Now I don't do it as much anymore, but by trade, I was a professional audio engineer for 30 years.
Okay,
Not,
okay,
but but as a result of this side career, my day job and my night job. My day job was a regular job, and my night job was I was a professional audio engineer. That exposed me to a lot of different uh, types of music, ranging the gamut. And I've been in the clubs and I've been on the big stages and I toured Europe as a part of that. And I mean, frankly, one of the highlights, I suppose, was Mr. BB King walking
okay,
over to
okay.
me at the monitor desk and thanking me and giving me one of his guitar picks. And that's just one story. But here's the thing. I just that's a tough life. And I'm getting older and I can't keep up. And I have I have moved from classic rock and hard rock and discovered the genius that Michael Jackson and Prince actually were.
Okay,
And
okay,
now I'm not ashamed to say, at my current age and whiteness, I am at bluegrass. That's where
okay,
I'm at. But it's been the whole gamut.
okay. Now, first of all, that's an amazing BB King story. The thriller is gone. But we want to know
Yep,
is,
yep.
can you give us help introduce us to a bluegrass, a specific bluegrass artist or group? What should we be listening to if we would like to, you know, dive into bluegrass?
Okay. Right, right. What's catching my ear right now, and the videos that are appearing in my TikTok algorithm are it's a newer generation. So we're not talking about uh, bluegrass, like every other genre has been through uh, formative changes, and where we are now is the sort of a new grass kind of feel with younger artists, or at least younger than me anyway. And so they're bringing a new spin on bluegrass, and it's a lot fresher, and they're not locked into we're not, Bill Monroe, the classic bluegrass. uh these younger generations are modernizing it and making it accessible. There's sort of a pop value to
Okay, okay.
bluegrass now, and there's no better example than uh Alison Krauss is a artist that I enjoy, but I've been seeing a lot of videos lately with the Steep Canyon Rangers, who Steve Martin will sometimes sit in on, and I've had the chance to work with them, in an audio capacity. So that's kind of where my head's at. And I think if I could find some other musicians to play with, I would be like, "Do you know any bluegrass songs?" Because anyway, so yeah, that's I know that's not very exciting, but
Yeah, shout out to bluegrass. I mean, you putting this on. It's something I
yeah.
enjoy the music. Yeah, we look forward, and the People's Podcast audience, we love to hear people's favorite albums, music, so we can learn, teach us about you, but it helps us, expand our, you know, press.
Okay, but I gotta say this, in my capacity as an audio engineer, I have also worked several Broadway shows, so I've come to love musical theater, and people need to not have a stigma about musical theater. It's fantastic, and there is no better example. If you have not seen the movie Wicked, based on the Broadway show, which is based on the book, which is based on the movie, which
Yes,
was
sir. Yes,
based
sir.
on the original book. Lots of variations, but that girl, and I can't pull the name, that lady who uh, is in that movie, did a fantastic job. And I just think that when if you could feel it in your soul, man, then that's it. That's the music for you. Uh, because otherwise it's just it's got to grip you somehow, which certainly, yes, it's a musical, but I love the Broadway shows, and I that movie was the first time I had seen that show, and I was not disappointed. So I highly recommend it if you haven't already seen it and we're thinking twice about it. Yeah, yeah, you need to go. That girl can sing.
Absolutely. So when it comes to Wicked, it's everyone should go see it because it's very popular. That's when the song's from Wicked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I am someone who's big into musical theater, as my mother made all of her children. So we've done Beauty and the Beast, West Side Story, um, recently Little Shop of Horrors, as
Oh
well,
yeah.
Adam's Family Musical. So my family is a musical family. We love theater, so shout out to everybody who's out there. And I'm sure my sisters are watching. They're like Joshua because now I have nieces and nephews. They want me to do another production so I can help get them acclimated into the family music side of our family. So Chicago's my favorite musical. I would like to see it, love to see it on Broadway. I'm a big fan of the movie Chicago. But yeah, shout out to Chicago. Shout out to all of the music.
Well, when I was as an audio engineer, I ran sound again on Sundays only for 30 years,
Mm,
just Sundays at a church who specifically focused on the mission of um, reconciliation in worship
mm.
between white folk and black folk, and so it was a crossover blend of music, and so that was my introduction to black gospel, and so for 30 years, that's what I listened to on Sundays, and so I just became a large fan of that genre also, which again, I understand that bluegrass uh, on weekdays and black gospel on Sundays is quite the eclectic, unexpected mix. But I'm just telling you, these were the things that I was exposed to. And these were all things that I was mixing live
Mm,
and
mm.
learning that style and the culture behind it, no matter what the genre was. I mean, that's part of it for me. You become a part of the music. So
Yes, sir. I'm right here. And my sister Naima says, yes, we love musicals because our family loves musicals. And not only do we love musical, we love history and we love the channel on TikTok, JFK 60 years later. We want everybody to make sure that we follow, repost your videos. This has been an honor on behalf of myself, family, and the viewing audience of the People's Podcast. We're signing off. This is Joshua Leonard Muhammad signing off for the People's Podcast. Thank you all for watching. Saturday night. What a great night. And Sunday, we have some great interviews for you all as well. Thank you very much. You have a great evening, sir.
thanks, Joshua. It
Yes,
was
sir.
great. Thank
The
you.
honor was mine.